So today I took a test on Romeo and Juliet in English today. And I have to say, while I enjoyed the play, it was about two really stupid people. And if you haven't read it already, let me summarize it for you. So there's this guy named Romeo, he's a Montague, and there's this girl named Juliet, and she's a Capulet. The story begins with Romeo being all mopey, and his friend Benvolio asking him, "What's the deal, man? Why are you so mopey?" And then he says, "My love, Rosaline, has rejected me." If you don't know who Rosaline is this girl who was also a Capulet that rejected him. Now I know what you're thinking. Who would reject Romeo? Before you jump to conclusions, Romeo was a hopeless romantic who only wanted to, let's put it lightly, get into other girls' pants. Despite their houses, because the Capulets and Montagues were quarreling enemies, that was really stupid, he still wouldn't stop for love. Romeo was in love with appearances and not with the actual emotions attached to it. He was also about 16 to 18 years old. Juliet, on the other hand, is 13, almost 14. There is a ranging difference here, as you can already tell. So, Romeo and a bunch of his friends go to a Capulet party in masks, and Romeo sees Juliet and falls in love with her. Now, Juliet, being young, still doesn't understand what love is, or what love is to us. But back then, in order to get married, you first had to make an arrangement with the parents, but also there was a sense of that you had to woo the other person in order for them to agree to love you and marry you. Of course, because Juliet has never loved before, seeing as this was her first love, it was her most important at the time. So when Romeo comes over to her, he touches her hand. And they talk about touching palm to palm, and they should also do the same with their lips, which is kind of gross, PG-13. So Juliet falls in love with Romeo, but the love isn't really love. She is in love with being in love, and Romeo is just in love with her because he got rejected and she didn't reject him. So anywho, they fall in love behind their parents' backs, and blah 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 blah. They're lovers united or something. The same night, Romeo goes over to Juliet's balcony, the famous balcony scene. "Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo?" Even though that's saying that, "Romeo, why are you, Romeo, why are you Montague and I'm a Capulet?" Because you guys can't marry. But they marry anyway. Romeo goes to Friar Lawrence the next day and asks him to marry them. Now, Friar Lawrence is a good friend of Romeo and already knew about Rosalind, and he was like, "Girl, what are you doing? You crazy. You just fell in love with this other girl named Rosalind and you cried over her because she rejected you. And then the next day, you fell in love with this other girl. Is it because she accepted you, girl? Ugh." So, he eventually agrees to marry them because despite the weirdness of their love, he feels it could unite the two families together. Boy, was he wrong. About a day later, I believe, I'm not too sure, Tybalt challenges Romeo to a duel because Tybalt, who is a Capulet, saw him at the Capulet party and thought he was crashing. So in order to regain his pride, Tybalt was a old-timey type of fellow back then. He would challenge him to a duel to the death. So all of them are in a courtyard or something, and Mercutio, probably the best character in the play, who's fun and jokes around, is like, "Oh!" He is provoking Tybalt, and Romeo steps in it and he blocks them and is like, "Guys, let's chill, it's all good, it's all fun." Then Tybalt stabs Mercutio underneath Romeo's arm. Mercutio dies. Now, Mercutio was a really good friend of Romeo's, and Romeo looked at Mercutio dead, turned to Tybalt and went, "Oh no you didn't," and killed Tybalt. This, of course, led to Romeo's banishment. Why not? And Juliet's upset because she loves Romeo, but everyone thinks she's crying over Tybalt. And she's engaged to this other guy named Paris, who's okay, but he's boring, apparently. And she already sealed the deal, wink wink, nudge nudge, with Romeo. So, this leads to some problems. So what she does is, because the nurse is like, "Oh, whatever," because she and Friar Lawrence were the only ones who knew about the whole thing. He's like, "Oh, whatever, just marry Paris, forget about Romeo. Romeo's banished, she's gone." She goes to Friar Lawrence begging, asking him what to do. She's lost. She loves Romeo. And Friar Lawrence is like, "Girl, chill. I got this." He drugs her. Drugs her to the point that she looks dead. She's completely dead for 48 hours. Her skin's pale, her heart slows, it stops beating. So what they do is the Capulets are all set. They're like, woohoo, oh, poor Juliet. Actually, they didn't say poor Juliet. They were more whining for themselves. They didn't really care about Juliet, as the dialogue showed. So what happened was the plan was that she gets into the mausoleum because the Capulets are fancy. They had their own mausoleum, and Friar Lawrence would send a letter to Romeo, and Romeo would get the letter explaining that she was actually alive. He would go to the mausoleum with Friar Lawrence. Actually, no. He'd go to Friar Lawrence's cell. Friar Lawrence would go pick up Juliet. She'd wake up, and he'd be there with her, lead her to Friar Lawrence's cell, and they would run away together happily ever after the end. This is not the case, because when Romeo is away in his other town, in his banishment, one of his buddies, his servants, Balthazar, ran over to him and said that Juliet was dead. Now hold the phone. Romeo, he goes over to the mausoleum and he says, don't disturb me, I'm doing stuff. I'll pay you, if you come back I'll kill you. So Balthazar, he runs away. What Romeo finds out is Paris, with another man, is in love with Juliet. He's always been in love with her, and he plans to lay a rose or a flower with Juliet every day she's dead. Yeah, it's adorable, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I don't understand why they do that. That's a bit creepy. So Romeo sees him, and he's just like, leave me alone. I have to kill myself. I'm unhappy, man. Just leave me alone. But Paris thinks he's trying to steal the corpse of Tybalt for revenge or something. So he's like, oh no, boy. So they start dueling in the dark, and Romeo wins, which is weird. So then he finds a light, and he's like, oh, look. Oh, it's Paris. Oh, oh, oh. So he goes over to Juliet and sees Juliet's body. And he's like, oh, woe is me, blah, 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 blah. So he takes poison that he got from the apothecary at the other town. He drinks it, and he dies. And then, as soon as he dies, Juliet wakes up. She's like, oh, look, beautiful day, even though I'm in a place with all these dead people. And then Friar Lawrence comes over, and he's like, oh, dear, what happened? Oh, the letter wasn't sent. Oh, he's dead. So then Juliet turns around and sees Romeo dead, and then she freaks out. I mean, I'd freak out too. But she tries to kiss his lips to get some poison, and it doesn't really work. So she takes a dagger that he just handily had with him, and she takes it out and goes, let my chest be the sheath in which you shall rust. And she stabs herself, and she dies over Romeo. So the moral of the story is, listen to your parents, and you won't die. Just don't fall in love with your enemies, I suppose. I say opposites attract, so I suppose they did attract, but I mean, it didn't really turn out for the better. They kind of both died. Juliet died twice, and I guess Romeo died twice too. He was banished. That could be considered pretty awful. As soon as they both died for reals this time, the two families kind of agreed. After they died, for reals, they agreed to be friends. So that was what I was required to read. That was really uninteresting. I've been working on some music videos. They haven't been turning out too well, but I'm planning on posting them if they're any good, but one sucked terribly. And the other one I might post when I have some time to edit it, because there's a lot of editing involved, because I'm trying to sync the video with the song. It'll, if it works, it'll actually not be too bad. And the song's not too bad either. I actually like the song, that's why I chose it to do a music video over. But message me if you'd like to see anything else. If you want me to answer questions or do a tag or something. I don't know. Awfully boring. Just leave suggestions or stuff like that, because this gets awfully boring if you're not creative like me. So